Oh.
All right. All right. Good evening. I would like to call to order the Keizer Long Range Planning Task Force. It is Monday, February 26th, 2024, and ask our city recorder to please call roll.
Matthew Stallman.
Here.
Melissa Martin.
Here.
Elaine Wilson.
Here.
Jane Erb.
Here.
Lori Christopher.
Here.
Susan London.
Here.
Jonathan Thompson.
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Here.
Councilor Duran.
Here.
Council President Starr.
Here.
Councilor Reed.
Here.
Councilor Cross.
Here.
Councilor Kohler.
Here.
Councilor Husman.
Councillor Husband is excused this evening. Thank you very much. So picking up where we left off 2 weeks ago, I want to thank everybody for the work done 2 weeks ago on part one of the Long Range Planning Task Force. I am pleased that we are able to spend additional time this year working through a number of the complex issues around our city finance. And we will pick up now with, I believe it's with the water system. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Brown and Mr. Wood.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council, and Long Range Planning Task Force. Again, picking up from where we left off on page 28 of the presentation. At the top, it should say Water System Overview.
Oh, you know what? I skipped something, so can we press pause?
We
I
absolutely can
skipped
press pause.
approval of the minutes from 2 weeks ago. So I think we probably should do that first to stay in order. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from February 12th, 2024 as presented.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Council President Starr, seconded by Councilor Reed. Are there any additions or corrections that anybody wants to note at this time? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously. Now, Mr. Wood, Mr. Brown, thank you.
So as I was saying, we left off on the water system. Part of our long-range planning task force, we'd like to give an update on the utilities, the major utilities that the city operates. So that way you can have an idea of where we're at financially as we head into the budget season. So the Keizer's Water Division operates under the Oregon Administrative Rules for Public Water Systems, and that's enforced by the Oregon Health Authority Drinking Water Services. So we have certain things that we have to maintain, and we're checking all those boxes. The city has 3 reservoirs, 15 pump stations, and a lot of lines of miles of water line. The city can produce approximately 172 million cubic feet of water and has a storage capacity of roughly 2.75 million gallons. In addition, we have a lot of public fire hydrants that we maintain as well. The system serves about 11,000 metered accounts, and that's a mix of residential, some commercial, and a little bit of industrial, although not very much. Our desire is that we provide low-cost water while ensuring that the water system is maintained for the long run, as outlined in the Water Master Plan, which is dated 2012. In comparison to other cities, we really do benefit here in Keizer from low-cost water because we don't really have to do a lot of treatment to our water. There's a big difference when you pull the water out of the river, like Salem has to, versus us pulling it out of the aquifer underneath the city. So there's a lot of benefit to that, and that pays off for us financially for Keizer residents. One of the interesting things is Keizer does bill bi-monthly, where the majority of the other cities are monthly bills. So it does present a little bit of challenge when people move here sometimes, but after a while they do appreciate it. And that is one of the ways that we do try to keep costs low, because we're only producing statements for each household once every 2 months instead of every month. Similar, we only read meters every other month as opposed to every month. So those are some of the cost savings that also feed into where we land. So as you can see on the chart, this is made up of some comparable cities. Tried to pick some that are similar in size to us, similar composition of what we're looking at. For us, our monthly amount is about $16.61 per bill, or I guess per month, double that for the bi-monthly billing. And you can see the next closest, well, it looks like Salem at $31.02, or actually McMinnville at $25.18. So we're significantly lower as far as our water costs go in comparison to other cities. The master plan that I mentioned was drafted in 2012. It's designed to meet the needs of the city for the next 20 years. The plan had $9.9 million in capital improvements outlined. The majority at this point have been taken care of, with the exception of replacing the existing steel water lines throughout the city with ductile iron pipe, and also adding an additional reserve and pump station. So those two are outstanding. May not need the pump station in reserve. Question?
We do have a question, Ms. Christopher.
A couple questions. First one is, what does it save us by not producing a monthly bill? Just ballpark.
Gosh, I would say probably $15,000 per month.
Okay, and my next question is, are we working on a new master plan, since it was a 20-year plan in 2012, but we've been into it, I mean, is it revisited?
I'll turn it over to Mr. Lawyer, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll turn it over to the expert.
Thank you, Tim.
We're more than halfway through.
Standard practice is to revisit a master plan every 10 years, whether it's a water master plan, parks master plan, streets, whatever.
Okay, good.
We look at our master plans on a regular basis, and have evaluated the water master plan as not necessary to update it because of a couple things. One, the CIP plan is primarily water main replacements. That's not going to change until they're all replaced. They still need to be replaced. The master plan does call for an additional reservoir and pump station up north based on projected population. We're below that projected population right now. And so after evaluating the variables and the constants, feel it was not money well spent to update a plan that we're not probably going to get a lot of changes out of yet. So we'll just continue to follow the recommendations in that plan, follow population trends, and look at updating the master plan in the future.
And so, follow
Follow-up?
So basically, because we're out of land, we're not seeing a lot of growth, and therefore we don't need to update the water master plan because there's no need for adding currently.
That's part of it. The other part of it is a significant drop in per capita usage in water from what was planned, or what was predicted 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And this is industry-wide. This is not just Keizer. And I believe a lot of that has to do with low flow fixtures. Every fixture you buy now has a restriction of 2.5 gallons a minute or less, okay? A lot of automatic underground landscape irrigation systems, that saves a lot of water. All these things put together has shown us that we don't need to expand and have more production or more storage because the use is not going up as fast as we projected it was.
And is the CIP capital improvement plan, is that projected through, when did we do it? 12. So is that projected through 32?
Yes,
Okay, so everything is already pre-planned on there and that doesn't require any changes at this time?
that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
And so folks know, we had this conversation as part of our goal setting for the city council. We talked about this, whether it should be on our short or long-term goals. And Mr. Lawyer made the same comments at that time that this did not need to be on our short-term goal list because of what you just heard. And the city council has been watching this issue and working with staff to make sure that when it is time to do a master plan update, that we go ahead and make that happen. So, great follow-up there. Councilor Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Wood, you mentioned that by sending out a bill every other month, we save a significant amount of money, but don't we have a pretty good percentage of people paying online and not sending a bill out or sending the bill out online?
Sure, not as much as I would like, to be honest. I think our adoption rate is still, could use some improvement as far as people just getting the online pieces. We have a fair number of people that do online and paper bill at the same time. We send out between 5,000 and 7,000 just regular statements depending on the month. In addition, we send out about maybe 1,500 past due notices as well in any given month. So we're still doing a fair amount of paper. It would be great if people would go to online bill pay.
Follow-up?
Follow-up, thank you, Madam Mayor. The ones that pay online with a card, do we have a significant cost for credit card charges and such?
That's a good question. Yes, we do.
And do we save enough by not mailing that it makes it worth it for us to do?
Roughly credit card percentage. Oh, COVID's coming, I gotta go. Kidding. Credit card fees are roughly about 3.5%. The city does benefit from getting a utility rate for all of the credit cards that we process. It is very expensive. We spend $120,000 roughly a year in credit card fees. So when you compare that, I guess, to the $15,000 per month savings, I think it still makes sense to head the direction we're going. Again, on top of that, you also have staff time of processing checks in the mail, that kind of a thing as well, that just adds to the complexity. I like it when we just get a digital file we can import. That makes things a little bit easier for us.
Thank you. Ms. Erb?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I ask how long, once the bill is not paid, it's past due, how long do you wait before sending that past due notice?
Good question. For everyone at home and everyone here, statements are always due on the 22nd of the month. No matter what month it is, no matter when you get it, it's always the 22nd. We try to send out past due statements on the 23rd. So we try to get them out as quickly as we can. There's some reason for that. If it does, when we do past due statements, it also goes to landlords. And that's our official notice to landlords to say, hey, if your tenants don't pay by the time shut-off comes, we're going to be placing a lien against your property. So that's an important component for us to get that past due statement in the mail as quickly as possible. So typically the 23rd, it does present a challenge sometimes when people think they're doing online bill pay through their bank. Oftentimes those banks will turn around and issue us a check. Well, I paid it on the 22nd, but yeah, your bank took it out of your account on the 22nd and mails a paper check that doesn't get to us for a couple of days. So then people get past due statements and they get all worked up about it. We do have a grace period from the 23rd until usually the second Monday of the following month. Grace period, there's no penalty if you pay within that time period. Just when it gets to that, back to the second Monday, that's when the shut-off process happens.
Follow up?
So I am one of these people who has it set up from my bank, and like you mentioned, it probably is late, even though I had it set up and it didn't get there until the day after or something, and you're saying that right the day after, you're already mailing a notice out. So I just feel like we could have a cost savings if you would give it a week or even 5 days, so that all those people who thought that, you know, we're gonna be on time, we're only gonna be a day or two late because of the banking situation, how much money could we save if we just gave it a few days?
That's a good question. I don't have a solid answer for you.
1,500.
I would have to-
a month.
Sure, I'd have to go back and look at the timing of when we actually get the payments. I do track that daily, but I can't recall off the top of my head of when we see the surge after the past dues. Just anecdotally, typically we mail them out on the 23rd, and probably the first, second, third of the month is when we start to see a lot of activity generated again. So some of that is obviously mail time from when it leaves us to when it gets to the residents. But I'll have to get back to you on that one.
I'll go to Ms. Wilson and then I'll go to Councilor Cross.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm just thinking out loud here. You said that the cost of processing credit card fees are about $120,000 a year. I'm losing my voice. Is that, I think I would say recently many businesses have been passing on to the customers their credit card fees, which I'm personally not a fan of it. Really, but in consider the economy and everything, if our cost is about 3.5% in credit card fee, which is expense, would it be worth to perhaps have some incentives so people pay with ACH or debit card or check? You get a 1.5% discount, 2% discount on your bill if you pay with ACH or debit versus credit card, because they're basically competing with the credit card companies, right? I pay with my credit card, then I get $20 Starbucks card or whatever payback, chargeback they get. Is it something that maybe we can look at the cost and see if it's benefits us, and it benefits the population?
Sure, I think that's a great idea.
Thank you. Councilor Cross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Follow up to that, great ideas over there. Well, you're gonna have some too. So you said it was $15,000 a month cost savings. So how many households is that? If we have 39,000 people. Is that like $3 or $4 just to mail it out? Because then it made me think of what Ms. Jane just said, because if we are, how many past due notices that we're sending out at that $3 or $4 a piece?
So for the past due notices, we send out between 1,500 and 2,000 roughly.
But I mean, like roughly doing the math in my head.
Sure.
I mean, you're talking about.
So there's staff time, there's postage, there's paper, printing, all
So
of those
I guess
types of costs.
just as you start working on the budget, just kind of piggybacking on their ideas. If we are saving that, how much more can we save?
Sure, okay.
Thank you.
And we always want to encourage people with the online bill pay because then it just gets done. You don't have to think about it.
I
But
think I'm
anyway,
just gonna subliminally say online bill pay ACH.
yes, just get it done.
We'll just put that out into the universe and see what happens.
All right, thank you so much. All right, anything else on the water system before we go to,
Got a couple more slides.
we have more slides, okay.
Yeah, more to go.
More to go, all right.
So looking at water rate increases, we do strive to keep a level rate. We don't want to do 20% increase one year and no percent increase another year. Based on the cost of service analysis that we work through every year in conjunction with the water master plan, both of those predicted a steady rate increase of 3 to 4% annually. Consistent with previous years, we are going to recommend a 4% again this year. As you look at the chart, we did take 1 year off, and we're still kind of catching up a little bit from that. We took a COVID year off as far as rate increases go. So we are projecting a 4% rate increase going into the budget season. That'll get firmed up as we continue to do the budget process. As we look at the financial plan, we're fairly solid footing. Our ending fund balance is pretty good. You can see it kind of declines a little bit over time. That's to be anticipated because we do know that there's some cost savings within this projected model. Every year we see some cost savings where we may not have anticipated it at about this time. So, like I say, pretty solid plan. Not a lot to talk about with the water system. We've had it with us for many years and kind of know how it all operates. So, with that, if there's any additional questions on the water system.
Thank you. Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Wood, approximately, just on an average year, I can do in my head, I can kind of add 30, 30, 30 is 90. But what's the average number of days between when we start our new fiscal year and when we see that first tax payment? And the reason I'm asking is because July, August, September, October is 4 months, times 30 is 120. And you're projecting by 28 to 29, only having 106 days of cash on hand. So to me, that means we're not gonna have enough cash on hand. Am I misreading this chart?
One thing to consider is we don't use property tax revenues for utility funds.
Okay, well,
so this is all charges for service. So our goal here is roughly 60 days worth of cash, and that's basically a 1 billing cycle. So we're well ahead of where
We're
we need to
okay?
do this. Yeah. Oh yeah. We're sitting pretty well with the water.
And so we don't use any property tax revenue for anything having to do with water?
That is correct.
No staff, no nothing. So
That is correct.
nothing is gonna be paid for our water supply out of property taxes?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, anything else? All right.
Okay, I guess one last slide. Kind of what a 4% rate increase looks like for next year. We do the rate increases effective January 1st. That's so we can be in line with the City of Salem sewer rate increase that they typically have. So that way we're only explaining the increases once, not having to spread it out throughout the year. So for a residential house, we're looking at about an annual increase of $8.17 over the course of the year. For a multifamily, a fairly large one, we're looking at about $79.86. And for a commercial type of property, $24.55 over the course of the year. So while it's fairly minimal on a small basis, it does add up a little bit for the city overall.
Councilor Cross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What is multifamily? Can you define that?
Multifamily would be an apartment complex.
So any resident that's in there would have to pay that much?
No, that would be for the entire complex itself.
And sorry, just follow up on the whole water thing. You said you're looking at 3 or 4% increase if some of these ideas were maybe implemented. It possibly could be less. Is that right?
Potentially.
Thank you.
Ms. Christopher?
So is duplex, triplex, fourplex, multifamily?
I think in our model, I think that, well, they're called out separately. So I would consider them multifamily. That wouldn't necessarily be reflective of what we're looking at, because this is 175 units that they'd be using. So I wouldn't anticipate a duplex, triplex, or fourplex to use that much water. You would be much more in line with the residential. About that.
Good.
If your landlord adds more, it's because they want more money.
And always remember that we all have the option of reducing our water consumption during the winter, as Mr. Wood always reminds us, because that lowers, our water rates are really low. It's the sewer rate, the pass-through. That's the one that you get to reset in the winter. Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. From an operational standpoint, duplexes, triplexes, and the few fourplexes that we have that are on one parcel in the city are served by one water meter. So the property owner, I would assume, is paying that bill, and the tenants are paying whatever their owner's charging them. There are some fourplexes in Keizer that are part of a condominium association, and they also have one meter because it was originally one parcel. They can be sold individually, the units can be sold, but the water bill is covered by the condominium association. So they're not really under the multifamily category for water billing purposes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anything else on the water system? All right,
Okay, moving on to the stormwater system. We do try to comply with the Clean Water and Safe Drinking Water Act. That's a federal program. Often this gets referred to as the rain tax, but it's not really the rain tax, it's what we do to the rainwater tax. So as things fall onto your houses, your driveways and whatnot, it creates a bunch of yuck that goes into the storm drain. Our job is to clean that yuck out before it hits the rivers. So that's really the program that we're looking at. And by and large, the majority of the costs involved with this revolve around the main roads that we have, Chamala, River Road, those kind of places, the large parking lots, things like that. That's where the majority of the costs are involved. So that when people say, hey, I don't have a storm drain on my street, well, really that's because the majority of the costs associated with this program involves Chamala, River Road, those kind of places. So that's where we're seeing a lot of the runoff. A lot of the houses, a lot of that will get absorbed into the grass, lawn, that kind of a thing. So there's not as much of an impact there. But having said that, we do try to comply with all the requirements. There are pretty stiff fines if we don't comply with cleaning things as it goes into the streams. So with that, we got about 76 miles of pipe underground, a bunch of different devices designed to clean the water, manholes, catch basins, those kind of things. And again, our job with the stormwater is to make sure the stuff going back into the river is clean so we get stuff out of the stormwater's system.
if I could, I'm going to look to Mr. Lawyer for this. One of the benefits that we've seen from cleaning up the stormwater system, and many of us got to see the pictures of what got pulled out when the pipes underground were scoped out, and we could see what was down there, and then what was pulled out when they started cleaning them was really, really gross. Now, when we get a heavy rain, like this afternoon, what can you tell us about the localized flooding now compared to what it was prior to this program?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's greatly reduced because when we started the utility, our operation of the stormwater system was reactive. We reacted to complaints. At that point in time, the largest part of our system we inherited from Marion County, and it had been maintained under a reactive mode for many, many years. In an effort to comply with the requirements of our stormwater permits, we needed to inspect our pipes to find out what kind of condition they were in. And coincidentally, you can't really inspect a pipe with a video camera unless it's cleaned. So we clean the pipes first, then video inspect them. The benefit of cleaning them is water flows through them much faster and easier, and we get all that debris out of them and dispose of it properly, as opposed to it ending up in the waterways.
Thank you. All right.
So with our current system, again, we went out to compare against comparable cities. Keizer comes in at about $6.66 per month. Or $7.66, excuse me. Closest is West Lynn at $9.08, so we're still fairly low, below a lot of our comparable kind of cities. So we do benefit. Our program is still in development, and that may go up. as we continue with our video inspection and cleaning, repairing, that kind of a thing. So we did inherit the entire system from Marion County, and as we've talked about, we've been inspecting approximately 10% of the system every year, and going and doing any remediation kind of efforts that we needed to. We spent about $2.8 million in capital improvements since this has begun, and you can see it in the chart there, 2020, 22, 23, and 23, 24. We're starting to see an upward trend as far as the improvements go. So we're going to need to keep an eye on that to see where ultimately we level out and really what can we afford, or if we need to start thinking about a rate increase. So speaking of rate increases, we haven't really got to the point, since it's such a small dollar amount, that we're not talking percentages, we're talking cents per month. The original estimates were we would go 40 cents to 60 cents per month to support the system increases over time to keep a level rate system. We haven't done a rate increase since 2021. I guess actually 2020 was the last rate increase. So we are operating with the resources that we have, and we're going to need to keep a close eye on them as we move into the future to make sure that they're adequate. So as we look at the projection, right now, at the end of this year, we're going to be sitting fairly well again, a little bit better position than the water fund. We'll have about 188 days worth of cash on hand. You're going to see that trend down. Don't get too alarmed. The farther out you get, the more uncertainties there are. So we're going to have to keep an eye on those things as we move through time. But I'm not really anticipating much of a rate increase until 25, 26. And then we'll have to probably have another conversation. That's it with the stormwater plan, if there's any additional questions.
Councilor Cross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So do all of these separate budgets have contingency built in, and we just don't see them on the graph?
Correct.
So, I mean, for anyone watching at home that maybe doesn't see budgets, that $24 is still 15% in the bank, right? I mean, for a rainy day or a stormwater day.
Sure. Yeah. I like that rainy day. I think it's 10% that we put away. Can't remember off the top of my head. It's either, I think, 10 or 15% roughly.
Okay,
of
thank
the
you.
expenses.
Yeah, thank you. I heard small dollar amount. I think that when we're going through this and all these items add up. So I just want to put it out there that I'm aware of that. Thank you.
And just to follow up on that, with the efficiency of this particular stormwater utility, that we've been able to do a lot of work that's been preventive. So we have a lot less erosion. We've got other issues that we don't have, especially with localized flooding and so forth, that were affecting a lot of our infrastructure, a lot of our roadways and neighborhoods prior to this going in. That was something that we talked about a great deal when this utility was created, was what else is it going to do for the city to get the best bang for the buck for our community. And now there's a lot less flooding in our neighborhoods as a result of that. So I will go to Ms. Christopher. Yes.
I didn't understand. Oh, sorry. I didn't understand you. We're going to increase it 40 to 60 cents, or we're not?
That was the original plan when the fund was developed.
Okay.
But we haven't needed to do that for the last several years.
So you're not going to make a recommendation this year to increase it?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Anything else? Okay.
Okay, moving on to the American Rescue Plan Act funds. We're going to just switch topics altogether. The American Rescue Plan Act, also known as ARPA, was signed into law March 11th, 2021. The intent of the law was to provide fast and direct economic assistance to American workers, families, small businesses, and industries. Also, local government benefited significantly from this. The city has entered into 3 agreements to receive ARPA funds. One with the federal government, we got $8.8 million. The state of Oregon, we got $850,000. And then Marion County, we got $2 million. And that $2 million is earmarked for the turf field project. So we haven't received the $2 million. It's on a reimbursement basis. So once the turf project field gets completed, we'll be able to get those funds.
We have a question from Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Wood, how much of that, 850,000 from the state of Oregon was pass-through dollars?
150,000 of that. When we applied to get those funds, or actually we called them, internally we call them the bill post money. He gave us a direct allocation of some of the resources that they had, and we had two projects that we needed to do with those. The first was provide pass-through funding to CASA of Marion County, and then the other part was to do the Meadows pump house infiltration system. So if you go up to Meadows Park, up River Road, that new building, that's the result of the bill post money.
So just follow up, Madam
Follow up.
Mayor. Thank you. So just to clarify, that was not a choice of the city. That was dedicated and directed by then Representative Bill Post on where that money was to go.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I think at the time, they could only allocate whatever amount of resources they had to two or three different organizations, so, yeah.
Okay.
So going back through the years and looking at all the projects that we've been working on, maybe realize that we have been really busy. Fiscal year 21-22, we spent $440,000 roughly. We did the cost of Marion County pass-through. We got some computer equipment, which was primarily routers, switches, and some desktop computers. That was really desperately needed for our cybersecurity projects. We got some police radios, handheld radios, Keizers, and laser sights. Meadows Pump House engineering work began. We also did the 2022 resurfacing engineering work. Because of the pump house, we had to get some additional pollution insurance. Then we did a pass through the Keizer closets for $2,400. And then we got some COVID policy compliance documentation prepackaged for us for $1,200.
Ms. Christopher?
So of the 850, 440 was spent. Am I reading that right?
That was just in the first year. So of the 850, we've got more coming.
Okay, great.
Yeah, stand by.
Okay.
Yep. So moving on to 22-23,
Here's the pump.
we spent about 2.2 million. So again, the resurfacing project, we actually did the project. Meadows Pump House, another 494,000. The Wrights Well project began, and we had to do a new well up at the Wrights Well site. That's been enjoyable. It's been
And press pause on that one a little bit. That was an unanticipated, we were talking about the water master plan earlier. This was not on the list of things we need to replace now. And Mr. Lawyer's nodding his head, so if we could make sure everybody understands the joy of this particular project. She says facetiously.
Yeah, that site I call the money pit. The Wrights Well site has been a challenge for us since we drilled the original well back in the early 2000s, I think it was. The bottom line is the well failed, had sand intrusion to a point, we couldn't stop it. We had to abandon the well and drill another well to try and find sand-free water. After many trials and tribulations, the contractor struggled. It was just unbelievable how long it took. We got a well that produces the amount of more water than we were actually really looking for, hoping for, and it's virtually sand-free. So that well will be coming online here in the next few weeks, waiting for the motor for the new pump to arrive. Can you have it installed, and then we will have it active. Yes. That site has been a thorn in my side for many more years than I care to talk about. And you're right, Madam Mayor, that was an expense that we did not plan for, we did not anticipate. And if it wasn't for the funding from the ARPA funds, we would have either had to delay some other capital improvements or raise the water rates more to pay for that project.
Thank you. All right, thank you for getting everybody up to speed on that particular project. So,
okay. Continuing on, we started the turf field project engineering, and that's for the 2 soccer fields out at Keizer Rapids Park. We did provide a one-time accrued leave payout to city staff. This was in recognition of not being able to take a lot of time off during the COVID years. So instead of having them leave and having them take time off, we let them cash some of that out. We also started work on the event center in the police storage building. We gave $60,000 to the Keizer Community Library. We bought a truck for code enforcement. We had a citywide high-performance organization training. We did a pass-through to the Keizer Heritage Foundation for $55,000. Bought some more police weapons and sights. We did a event center support staff. As we talked about last year, we brought on the event center coordinator earlier than we probably should have, and this was to ramp up the event center operations. The Chariots K-12 free fare funding of $30,000. Started working on a strategic planning process. We bought the Cold Wet Eagle. I think that's a highlight for me. The Keizer closets, we passed along $14,700. We started work on codification, agenda management software, and then we did a pass-through to the Keizer Community Dinner, and then we did some cleanup at the property owned by the city out at Keizer Station. And that was 22-23, so we had a lot going on.
Any questions on 22-23? Ms. Christopher?
Where is the event center police storage building?
We are working on it.
It's not here?
Yeah, it's not here. The event center component has actually gone out to bid, so I think next week we get the bids back.
Where's it proposed to be?
That way.
Of this building?
Is on this building, yes.
Yeah.
It's on this building?
Yep.
Yeah,
so-
we're attaching it to this building.
So-
The event center desperately needs some storage. We moved chairs from one room to another, kind of playing the shuffle game to get events set up.
And then maybe to follow up on that, because yes, I can see where this would be confusing. The event center storage is on the current Civic Center building. The police storage building is a separate facility, correct?
Correct.
So,
Still attached?
no, it's a separate, and we don't have, it will not be part of this building, or was it at that time considered it could be an addition to this facility? Is that why these are together?
I don't know why I put them together, except for I just looked at, they're in the same line item for me. So I suppose this is probably accounting language for me, as opposed to making sense. But yeah, we can definitely separate them out. The police evidence building is going to be a separate building in the Chalmers Jones Park area.
Okay,
There's a part of the park there at the very south end that really isn't used for very much, and that's where we're considering putting that building.
okay, so there's room on the existing campus that was being looked at for a police evidence building, and this was something that was identified as necessary by our police department because of the voluminous amount of materials that have to be retained for X period of time. I'm looking to the chief to help with that, to describe that, please.
It's really those two gentlemen's fault over there. Our investigations lieutenant and supervisor. It's all the cars that we get from homicides we have to keep forever, indefinite, and other vehicles. It would be really a vehicle storage that we have to keep the vehicles up to date and in the best condition as possible. So it's pretty hard to do that in an open lot. And then we have lots of other evidence items that we could put in there as well.
So just to follow up on that, then the police storage, this is a separate building that would be controlled specifically for the retention requirements for legal matters, law enforcement matters.
That's correct.
Okay. So yes, if we could split that, that would be fantastic for my brain to understand that one is for storing chairs, the other one is for storing really important evidence. And they're really pretty different levels of security. Okay, that would help. But the grand total of that for, in the 22-23 year was the engineering portion and some planning?
That's correct.
Okay. Any questions on anything else on the 22-23? Looking. Okay,
Moving on
there we
to-
go. Counselor Cross. I was
Um,
waiting for it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry. Mr. Wood, now that I'm looking at this, and I think I mentioned, or well, I sent an email today. So now, knowing that these ARPA funds are going, the cultural center would qualify for TOT money, hypothetically, if we all voted on it, right?
Potentially, sure.
Thank you.
Wait, what?
Oh, just paying for stipend.
So switching over the TOT dollars, changing the policies around that to use it for the 20,000 operating for the cultural center?
That was the question, does it qualify?
Okay. Mr. Wood?
So for the Heritage Foundation requests in here, these were specific asks for specific improvements. I think
Right.
the 22, 23 was windows, as I recall. So could we use this for TOT? Sure. Although I think it makes more sense to use the ARPA funds since those have a limited time period that we have to use them in. But the ongoing contractual arrangement where the cities provide some direct support to the Heritage Foundation, that could be, we could use TOT for that if we choose to.
Okay, so this is for going forward, not for, obviously.
Not for this, but
Right.
saying when you run out of ARPA.
Right, when ARPA is done, which everything has to be expended, just to remind everybody, by the end of 2026, calendar year, not fiscal year. And yeah, that will be a policy conversation to see if that can switch over, especially in regards to the, making sure that the current campus does not need general fund dollars.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything else on 22 and 23? So actually, just to help me out then, Keizer Community Library that was for operations, that was for, because the fundraising couldn't be done, et cetera, and the Heritage Foundation, those were targeted for specific projects, if I remember correctly. And those were which projects?
It was windows with stipend, I think it's both, windows and the stipend, yeah.
Windows and the stipend, and then there was another one,
The door.
the door.
That wasn't until the next year,
Okay, that's on the next page.
because we just finished that, but I do have a question.
Okay, that's on 23, 24. So the Heritage Foundation, that was the windows
And the stipend,
and the stipend,
correct.
okay, for 22, 23. And then Ms. Christopher, you had follow-up?
Yeah, the $7,500 for the community dinner, is that for, is that for one dinner? Or-
No.
Oh, what is that for?
Counselor Kohler?
Oh,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Keizer Community Dinner is a monthly event that happens at the St. Edward Catholic Church currently, and they were running out of funds to do that, and Counselor Starr met with them and with some others, and we were able to help them with the loss of income that they had during ARPA, during the COVID, in order to fill that need. That grant was issued.
so how many months does that cover?
That'll cover the whole year.
Okay, and then what is the city-owned property cleanup?
I believe, Mr. Wood?
The city owns some property out at Keizer Station, and it was starting to become a nuisance out there, so we mowed it and pushed some dirt around.
So I think that was Mr. Crosby, our code enforcement, worked very hard on getting
That
that
would be correct.
project done. Thank you. Counselor Cross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What was the one-time fee you mentioned for employees? How much was that per employee?
They could cash out up to 80 hours of their accrued vacation.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, anything else? All right,
Moving on to 23, 24, we're looking at spending about 7.1 million. Again, these are still anticipated. We got a few more months left in the year. So this information is really as of probably early February. So we're looking at the turf field project. That'll be about $4 million. The event center storage, that's connected to this building, about 800,000. The Meadows Pump House project, another 507,000. We're looking at recruitment and backfill of some of the critical positions. This includes deputies, city recorder, chief of police, city attorney, and multiple police officers. That's the majority of what's going in there. Police evidence storage, looking at about 300,000. The park camera project, about 300,000. The Wrights Well project, finishing that up for 191,000. We are updating our phone system and email. This will allow us to take our email off to the cloud, which will significantly improve our cybersecurity process. I'm looking at license plate reader cameras for about 100,000, police body cameras for about 100,000, codification, agenda management, and HRIS payroll software for about 100,000. Finish off the strategic planning process for 40,000. We passed along some more dollars for the Keizer Heritage Foundation. This was to do ADA building door access kind of things. We updated the gate at the police department. Some additional high performance organization training for 20,000. We have 15,000 for the Keizer Community Library. This is the remaining amount to support the grant writing process. And then we also provided Keizer Closets $14,700 as pass-through funding. And then we also did a digital media library where we got some professionally done pictures of the city. So 23-24 was a lot of work.
All right, I'm gonna go to Ms. Martin.
Madam Mayor. I do have a question about the difference between, the event center storage is 800,000 and the police evidence storage is 300,000. And I'm just kind of wondering, chairs versus vehicles, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Sure. I will say the police evidence storage is still in process. We haven't got to the point where we're going out for proposal on that yet. So that number could change. There's a few factors that are going to play into that one. The event center storage, as I did indicate, has gone out, and we do have a bid or an engineer's estimate in the mid 700,000. So there could be a little bit of flexibility in there as well.
So just to follow up on that, the number for the police evidence storage is a placeholder at this point?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna go to Ms. Christopher and then to Council President Starr.
So here's my question. So we've got $500,000 worth of cameras for this budget year, 23-24. And we've got the turf field project, but we don't know what the cost for, we don't have a management plan yet, so we don't know what the costs are going to be for managing that project. Correct? We don't know yet.
That's correct.
Okay. And we've got a police evidence storage of 300,000, but that's a placeholder. Here's my question. If so the ARPA funds have to be allocated, but they do not have to be implemented. So.
Until
26. So if those funds are allocated, here's what I'm afraid of. We have a lot of expenses coming up. We've got really big projects. It's all happening in 1 year. I 100% believe that we've got to move forward with body cameras for the police force, 100%. But that will be our first foray into being in the camera business. Right now, we don't know anything about the camera business. We've never done that. So if we allocate the 500,000, can we, and I guess I'm asking, should we dip our toe in the water and do the body cams in 23-24, do the next set, and maybe that is, I would look to the chief to say which one is of most benefit, the license plate reader cameras or the part cameras, do that in 24-25, and then do the final one in 25-26. That meets the requirements of ARPA, where the money will all be spent by 2026, but it also provides some flexibility so that if we have cost overruns on the police evidence storage or the event center storage or the turf center project, it gives us some flexibility there, because not all of that would be implemented in 23-24. I think that's a lot. I think we're in an environment where we've got the highest inflation rate in 2 decades. We're spending a lot of money in 1 year, and that's a lot of big projects in 1 year. And the requirements of ARPA are that we do it by 26. So why are we doing this all in 1 year? I don't know who answers that question. That's my question.
So I'll start with, this is these are the obligations. These don't have to be spent until December 31, 26. So we're saying that the 23, 24, this includes expenditures up through the end of 26.
But it doesn't say that. It says anticipated expenditures for 23, 24.
Mr. Wood?
So a couple of corrections. We do have camera systems going now. We have them on the police vehicles. We also have a few throughout the city hall building itself. So originally we were thinking of using the same similar system, but we're pursuing different options as far as what we can get for the body cams, the park cameras, and obviously the LPR. Our goal originally was try to get everything on the same system. So that would be really the big motivator to have it all done at one time and get some kind of savings. With respect to the projects themselves, we kind of have to have a contractual obligation by the end of the year. There's a lot of stuff floating around. When they say it has to be obligated, it doesn't mean we just budgeted, it means we have to have some contracts kind of things in place. I anticipate, this is just me speaking, I anticipate that the federal government will probably extend that deadline. As of about 9 months ago, the majority of the ARPA funds hadn't been spent yet. So I think there's a lot of people that are going to get really panicky and trying to push a lot of money out. So I really would not be surprised if some of the deadlines get adjusted. But having said that, right now the current rules say we have to kind of have it contractually obligated by the end of 24.
So we don't have to move forward with a contract at the end of the budget, when the budget is adopted. We would have a period of time before we had to make that final decision, and we may have more information at that time about the police evidence storage and also about the events center storage.
Sure, yeah. Like I say, these are anticipated, so there's going to be some, depending on the time period, some of this is going to overlap into the next year, so there will be some wiggle room.
We'll go to Mr. Stahlheim.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Really quick, could you sort of elaborate on this parks camera situation? What is the goal there?
Sure. The primary goal is to help reduce the amount of graffiti that we're seeing in the parks. So we want to strategically place cameras out so we can kind of have the big eye in the sky.
Additional question, do you have any data at this time to suggest that would be an effective deterrent?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Chief?
And if I may, one final question.
I'd like to let Chief
Apologies.
respond.
Of course.
The reason that Lieutenant Nelson and Sergeant Edison are sitting in the audience this evening is they have to answer all the questions about these cameras. So they are the ones heading up the project, and they actually have good news when it comes to numbers and dollar amounts. If you'd like to hear from them, they can, I said about a 5-minute presentation, so it wouldn't extend us too long. If that would.
Mr. Stahlheim, if you want to ask your additional question, and then with the concurrence of the group to go ahead and hear from our staff on this issue, would that be all right? Okay, Mr. Stahlheim?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. My final question is, have we explored cheaper alternatives? If we're not sure about the effectiveness of this program before we undertake this, what with maintenance and management costs to boot, can we try, I don't know, motion lights or something first and see what kind of response we get with that before we step into this huge liability?
And with that, I think we have just given a great segue to our professional staff to talk about these programs and what they can do for the security and safety of people in the city of Keizer. And we want to drag up a second chair. Okay. Thank you so much.
Is it on?
If the red light is on, it's.
Red light's on.
All right.
Right. Madam Mayor, councilors, staff, Long Range Planning Committee. My name is Lieutenant Chris Nelson, and I oversee our Criminal Investigations Division at Keizer PD. And to the right of me is Detective Sergeant Arson Edison. He supervises the Criminal Investigations Unit. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about the LPR system that we're proposing for the city of Keizer. I'll just talk briefly about that program. We started researching well, I'll back up a little bit. So we actually had LPRs at Keizer PD probably a decade ago, and they were installed on police cars. That program ran out due to funding and partnership with other agencies, and so we no longer actually have LPRs on our police cars. So about 2 years ago, we started researching LPRs, and we quickly realized that it was going to cost a lot of money because we were faced with having to install poles, have contracts with PGE, bring out electricians, and also have to provide cellular service to those cameras. And we initially we were looking at about $250,000 for an LPR system. In about January of 2024, Chief Copeland and I met with a deputy chief from Salem Police Department, and we talked about a partnership for the LPR program. And what that partnership is entailing is basically the Keizer PD being allowed to install LPR cameras on traffic lights in the city of Keizer that is maintained by the city of Salem. And essentially connecting those cameras, it would be power over Ethernet. So it would be essentially installing those cameras onto the traffic lights and connecting to the city of Salem network. So we're basically not having to pay for the power, we're not having to pay for cellular service. And the cost, what we've gotten so far from bids is that the total cost would be around $80,000. And that $80,000 would be an upfront capital cost for 5 years. And then after the 5 years, it would cost approximately $15,000 a year to maintain that LPR system. And the camera system that we were proposing would be 16 cameras, basically covering the perimeter of the city of Keizer, and also cameras along River Road. The goal in doing that is basically to capture vehicles coming into Keizer and vehicles going out of Keizer. I can give you 100 examples of major felony cases in Keizer where the LPR system would have decreased personnel costs and also give us investigative leads very quickly to solve those crimes. But for this evening, I have a few cases I wanted to bring to light, just so I can emphasize the need for public safety and LPRs in Keizer. So in May of 2022, the Oregon Right to Life building was firebombed in the middle of the night. Detectives were called out to that investigation. We spent hundreds of hours in investigative time working that case. We collected video surveillance up and down River Road, into the neighborhoods, and we got some pretty good leads. We were able to figure out, hey, the type of car. We were able to figure out we have one suspect. The make, model of the car. We were able to figure out how the suspect entered the city, and also the route the suspect left. Now, if we were to have an LPR system established in the city of Keizer, we would have been able to get a license plate and quickly got an investigative lead to try to solve that crime. That case 2 years ago we investigated that, and we passed that on to our law enforcement partners, the FBI and ATF. To this day, that case is still unsolved. And then in January of 2023, Ringo's Tavern was robbed by 2 armed suspects. Again, detectives did another camera canvass along River Road. We got a pretty good idea of our suspect vehicle. But again, we didn't have an LPR system, so we didn't really have an investigative lead. That case still remains unsolved to this day. And then in July of 2023, we had a shooting at one of the local schools. It was after hours. It was an isolated incident. However, there were 2 suspect vehicles that night that arrived and then left the crime scene. We had a pretty good idea from video surveillance, the make and model of the cars. We worked that investigation, hundreds of hours of personnel hours, lots of overtime hours in our investigations unit. The good news is ultimately we were able to track down the suspects and charge them for that particular crime. But in this particular case, if we would have had the LPR system, we likely would have reduced personnel cost and being able to identify our suspects quicker. And then most recently, about a week and a half ago, there was a shooting involving 2 vehicles on Cherry Avenue. A suspect from another vehicle shot at another car. That case is unsolved. The only thing that was left at the crime scene was shell casings, which we're examining right now. We did get video surveillance, but obviously a lot of the video surveillance that we collect from business owners and just residents with Ring cameras, the quality is not good enough, and it doesn't have the technology built into it to capture license plates. And that's why it's so important to have license plate readers. This program will really benefit the city by reducing personnel costs. It's going to pay for itself very quickly. And additionally, it's going to help us clear some of these major felony cases. And ultimately, it's going to improve the overall public safety of our community. And as it relates to the LPR program, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions on the LPR? Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Lieutenant Nelson. Curiosity here, the interconnectivity, I know you talked about sharing with Salem Police Department. What about with surrounding law enforcement agencies, Marion County Sheriff? Can you talk a little bit about buy-in from those agencies? Thank you.
So we've been having monthly meetings between Keizer PD, Salem PD, and Marion County Sheriff's Office. We're all in talks to partner to have one regional LPR database. So each law enforcement agency would have access to all of the data that's being collected throughout this region. And this is actually part of Salem PD's gun violence reduction program that they're currently doing to reduce gun violence in Salem. So yes, so all of our partner agencies would have access to the data. And I can let you know that, so Salem PD has already given us access to their LPR system. And a few months ago in McNary Estates, there were 2 suspects that were in the middle of the night attempting to steal mail in McNary Estates. Because we had access to that system and we had a license plate from that particular case, that vehicle was captured on the LPR system in Salem numerous times, and it gave investigators a lead of the vehicle, because it takes a photograph of the license plate and also the overall photograph of the vehicle, and also gave us a lead of the occupants in that vehicle while it was captured on this Salem LPR system. So it's extremely beneficial, and it's so beneficial for us to partner with our law enforcement agencies in this community.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wilson.
Hi, thank you, Madam Mayor. If I understood correctly, Salem will be allowing us to use their network for the system at no cost?
Yeah, so it's basically we're connecting to their fiber optics feed through the existing feed for running the lights in the city of Keizer. So we're just plugging into that existing network feed.
Okay, is there a catch to that, or is Salem gonna just let us do it with no cost?
So what we would be responsible for, and this would be included in the $80,000 figure, would be for Marion County and Keizer PD to contribute money towards a server.
Okay.
So that we would pay for part of the server at the city of Salem. And to access, so there's no real network issues, or to access the LPR system, it's a web-based system that would be outside of the city of Salem network.
Okay.
So all of our agencies could get access to it.
Okay, thank you.
Follow up, Mr. Brown.
Also, these are our light poles, and we contract with the city of Salem to maintain them for us. So it's our data and our electric in there. We pay a fee for the electric already.
Right, and the lights we're talking about are traffic signal lights. We're not talking about our street lights, which are, you know, for illumination, but we're talking about traffic lights,
Correct, it
traffic
would be
signals.
for traffic lights.
Right, so just want to clarify there, because street lights sounds like, you know, the ones that are maintained for us by PGE. Ms. Herb?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a couple of questions. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. So a lot of cars are stolen these days. Is this system helpful in recovering stolen vehicles also? And what other kinds of things is done with the data?
It's a very good question.
Oh, may I ask one? My third one
Yeah.
is on those traffic signals, is this to capture red light runners and speeders and that kind of thing too? Oh, thank you.
I'll answer the last question first. It's not to capture red light speeders. That's a completely separate system. To your question, yes. So officers would have the ability to put into the LPR system vehicles that have been reported as stolen. We could also put in vehicles associated with Amber Alerts. We could put vehicles associated with major felony crimes for patrol officers, so they could be alerted when it passes one of those LPR systems. And also for missing and endangered individuals. Oftentimes we'll get reports of someone, say like they may have dementia, and they take off and we don't know where they're at. Now, if we had an LPR system, we would immediately enter that vehicle into the LPR system so it could alert officers to that vehicle if it passed by one of the LPR systems. And what was the second question?
I'm just concerned about privacy
Sure.
and having cameras all over and monitoring all of us. Is that data going to be used in any other way?
That's a very good question. So the plan is to have the cameras installed to where they're only angled and capturing the vehicles on the roadway open to the public. So it would not be capturing any private areas. And typically the retention period for the license plate data is anywhere from 30 to 60 days. And it does not, the LPR system does not collect any type of personal data. So for example, we have, for example, if we had a shooting in the city of Keizer in a particular area, detectives would go to the nearest LPR camera and search for that date range and the description of the vehicle to collect that information. Now, it would only give us a license plate, and there's no personal information associated with that. We would have to then go into the criminal justice system. It's called LEDS and NCIC. And the only way we could access that system if we have if it's related to a criminal investigation. And then once we entered that plate into the LED system, then that's when it would give us the information like the VIN number, the registered owner of the vehicle, name, date of birth, that type of thing that we would obtain. So we're not collecting any type of personal information from the camera system.
Okay, so do you have to have a warrant on that, or no, it's just you are investigating it as something that's a crime and you can go into that database and look?
Correct. We would not need to have a warrant for that information.
Thank you.
All right.
And just real briefly, I forgot to mention earlier, in addition to the LPR system that we had previously in the city of Keizer, we've also had a camera system that I developed in the year 2014. It's a surveillance camera system. I can't talk a lot about how it's used, but what I can say is we have 2 cameras that we utilize during major criminal investigations that we deploy throughout the city. And that system has been so successful. We have saved so much time and overtime. We've cleared so many cases using that type of system. So I just wanted to emphasize, we've actually, just to give a little bit of history and context, we've actually have quite a bit of experience with cameras at the police department.
Thank you. That's very helpful to know the background and the extent of Keizer Police experience and the collaboration across our law enforcement teams in this area. Is there anything else on the LPRs? Because I think there's also questions about the two other camera systems that are for public safety, and that's in our parks and the body cams. Are these, how does this whole thing go together to increase public safety in Keizer? I'm looking at you and also at Chief on who wants to take this.
I can say a few words about the parks cameras.
Okay, please.
So.
If you
parks
pull the
cameras
microphone
are-
a little bit closer. Thank you.
Thank you. So parks cameras are kind of a separate project, and there's a few reasons for that. It is a different type of camera that we would need in parks, not to capture license plates like LPRs, but rather activity in the parks. So these would be surveillance cameras with night vision, because in a lot of our parks we don't have any lights at night and they're pretty dark. So, and there's also, one of the reasons it would cost more to install parks cameras versus LPR is, like Lieutenant Nelson said, with LPRs on traffic lights, we already have power and internet. In parks, and most of them would not have the infrastructure, so that would have to be, like Mr. Lloyd provided me with some numbers for running, trenching, running conduit and wires, and installing poles, which adds to the cost. So initially we started with about 17, 18 cameras and included almost every park in Keizer, but since it was becoming a lot of money, we decided to, if approved, of course, start with maybe 4 parks where we actually have most of our problems, which would be Claggett Creek, Shamawa, and Dearborn side of the parking lots. So each camera in each of those. Keizer Rapids Park, we get some activity there. A lot of vandalism happens at the Little League fields, so a couple of cameras there, and the skate park. So if we start with those, with the electrical infrastructure costs, we could, and this is based on paying a vendor basically to come in and install the cameras professionally. We can also save money by doing some of the work ourselves and maybe buying some aftermarket hardware and parts. We could start with about $135,000 for 4 parks, up to 8 cameras. And like I said, we can actually, could be less than that, because if we do a lot of the work ourselves, we can save some money. To give you an example of what kind of issues we've had in those parks I've mentioned, like in 2021 in October, we had a shooting between multiple juveniles at Claggett Creek on the Dearborn side, which one male 16-year-old was shot through the spine and paralyzed. We had multiple sexual offenses reported in the parks. We had just recently, in December of last year of 2023, we had another shooting and a stabbing. A bunch of kids involved, big fight. There was lots of graffiti applied on the same night before the fight started. So I think the cameras would be a deterrent, and also it would definitely help us catch those responsible, because we usually, like Lieutenant Nelson mentioned, we do video canvas, and sometimes are able to come up with an idea what kind of car left the area, what color maybe, but a camera would give us a lot more than that. Clothing description, how many people, license plates even, things like that.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate you giving some examples of some of the activity in our parks that are creating public safety issues for our community. Chief, I was noticing you had something to add.
I was just going to talk about the body cameras real quick.
Okay, before we go to body cameras, anything else on the park cameras? Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Sergeant. I believe that you've done some additional research on on camera systems. Can you maybe talk about just a high-level overview of what you found in that research and the capacity in which you did that? Because I think that would be a really helpful information, not only for us as a long-range planning, but for our community in general. And then talk about maybe the deterrent aspect. So it's one thing to have the cameras catching the crimes and the suspects as they're happening, but also maybe the deterrent to the crime, i.e. the graffiti, and then how that would be of a huge benefit to Mr. Lawyer if we can maybe deter that crime and save the dollars of the cleanup from happening. So if you can work your magic and weave all of that together, that would be awesome.
I don't have the exact numbers, but I've looked before at places that have implemented parks cameras, like City of Medford and Grants Pass, and they reported reduction in crimes. And simply because a lot of times when the camera goes up, there's a sign at the entrance that says video surveillance in progress. And people see that and the word gets out. And, you know, those who are planning on committing some sort of crime like drug and sexual offenses in the park will likely find a different place to go.
And then, Mr. Lawyer, can you talk a little bit about the cost of ongoing vandalism in our parks?
I can't speak to any specific numbers, but it takes a lot of staff time to get that graffiti cleaned up as quickly as we can. Bob Newton Park in particular, late summer, right? The night of the parks tour, as a matter of fact, that weekend, night before, was just hammered with graffiti all over the park. And 4 staff members spent all day cleaning it up, ignoring anything else in the parks that needed to be done that day to get that taken care of. So I don't have numbers specifically, but a lot of time. And frustrated staff that go to a particular park one day and clean up graffiti, and 2 days later, they're back in the same park cleaning up additional graffiti. And that goes on, has gone on and on, so.
And one more follow-up, and then I think Ms. Herb had a question. The graffiti is of what nature?
Rude, inappropriate. There's, in my terminology, in my mind, there's graffiti and then there's art graffiti, okay? Graffiti in my mind is just bad words, negative stuff, just nothing good about it. There's art graffiti. I just went to the airport Saturday morning in Portland. There's a lot of art graffiti along I-205, okay? I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's okay, but it's at least somewhat artistic. It's not just words scribbled out with some kid, I'm assuming, doing it with a can of paint. So what we see in the parks is just the bad graffiti. Bad words, just scribbles, I call it.
Well, we were sent some of the pictures. Mr. Brown sent us a download of the pictures from Bob Newton Park, and it was horrendous. Just horrendous. And knowing that there were kids going on that playground and seeing that, and if they could read, which we want all of our kids reading by 3rd grade, they could read what was on that playground. And it was not words that we want them repeating. And I won't repeat on the air. I'm going to go to Ms. Erb, and then I'm going to go to Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a quick question. Are there issues with the cameras being damaged or vandalized themselves? Or are they fairly out of reach? Or do people not see them? Or is there a cost to kind of upkeep and repair of those cameras?
That would be a possibility, but we talked about this with Mr. Lawyer, would be installing them high enough where they'd be kind of out of reach for the general public.
Thank you. Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Isn't it true also that a lot of this graffiti is perpetuating the gang activity in town? Because that's what I'm seeing a lot of is the gang graffiti, and those activities are also perpetuated through that.
That's correct. Yeah, individuals painting the name, numbers associated with the organization that they're representing.
Oftentimes, you'll see the gang tagging, and then you'll see a rival gang come along and cross that out. So you're correct, it is perpetuating the gang activity.
Okay, anything else on the park cams before we go to the body cams? Mr. Stahlheim, did that answer some of your questions?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Mayor, Madam Mayor. My question, though, I do have one more, is that, do we need to go to that level just yet? I still wonder if there's a way, like, again, motion lights, to find a cheaper alternative, though I do understand how it could for some people be very vital, as well as law enforcement. My concern is that, would we really be stopping vandals? What concrete evidence do we have? Why would we spend $300,000 plus on a system that, you know, no offense, more or less could be beaten out by a hoodie?
I would say motion lights could go both ways, and Mr. Laura, we've talked about that before. There is a reason that there are not a lot of lights in the parks because they're closed after sunset, and more light would possibly attract some more activity. And motion lights would not help us with the investigation part. So if there's a major crime that occurs in the park and the involved individuals are leaving, then motion lights are no good as far as investigator leads.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's go on to body cams. Chief?
We're not going to hijack the entire evening, so I'll make this quick.
Well, and in all fairness, these are questions that we have all had, and there's been conversations. It's been a top priority for city council and for staff for quite some time, recognizing the significant need that we have, and the technology is going to be so important for increasing the public safety in this community. And so I'm going to press pause on you for a second. I want to say thank you to the due diligence that our city staff has done to make sure that what is getting put together will be effective, cost-effective, and collaborative to actually produce the results of public safety that you know is a priority for our community. So a huge thank you. This is very, very important for everybody to hear. Chief.
Okay. Body cameras are used for four main reasons in law enforcement: to improve officer safety, and there's studies behind all of this. And the studies, depending on what study you read, it could go one way versus the other way. So there was 70 studies done a couple years ago, and they're like all over the map. But the main four things that they've really kind of seen out of this is improved officer safety, increased evidence quality, and reduced civilian complaints. Because when what the civilian says is caught on camera, they can't say something different. And then reduced agency liability. And the cameras that we've chosen, that we've really looked at closely, are the Motorola's, which tie into our car cameras. So the car camera, when the car camera turns on, the body camera will turn on. When the body camera turns on, the car camera turns on. So they work simultaneously. And every one of our patrol cars is outfitted with a car camera already. And so anyways, it's just good practice in police work. If one camera's working, the other one should work as well. So you capture as much things as possible. And for the total cost, it was upfront cost, it was about $85,000 to adequately staff the police department with all the body cameras that we need. There'll be some ongoing costs after about 5 years, but that's not quite as much as just getting all the hardware, all the cameras in place. They come with, I think it's a 5-year warranty. And so after that, you just have to replace like one camera at a time, slowly over time.
So I want to reemphasize something that I heard twice, and that is the cost here is the initial investment plus 5 years. So we won't see additional cost to the general fund for these systems for 5 years. Is that correct?
That is correct for the LPR system.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe for the parks camera, we would need to use cellular service.
Okay.
And that is about, on average, about $50 a month for each camera in the parks for cellular connection.
So about $50 a month times 8, so we're talking, $400 a year? Or per month?
Yeah, per month.
Per month,
Yeah.
times 12.
So that would be the reoccurring cost for the parks cameras.
Okay,
Not a lot, but I wanted to mention it.
right.
Yeah.
That's really reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a 5-year warranty on the body camera stuff as well. And
Okay.
then the warranty would expire. We don't have to renew it. It would just be then the cameras aren't covered and you have to buy a new one. I think the body cameras, I can't tell you what they're going to be in 5 years, but probably somewhere between $800 and $1,200, maybe $1,500 a camera.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fantastic. Ms. Wilson?
One more question. So $50 a month is the cost for the camera for the parks. Is there an extra cost for saving the data? I mean, how long are we gonna have the data for? It's just live? Is it gonna be stored in a server? Is that a cost for that? Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the surveillance camera program that I mentioned earlier, where we have 2 surveillance cameras for major criminal investigations, we have a server at the city, and that server has the ability to handle the capacity of, I believe, a total of 10 cameras. So our plan would, it is called the Milestone software system. So our plan would be to put the parks cameras under that server, so there would not be any additional cost.
Okay, may I have a follow-up question?
Follow-up?
So as we implement more cameras, are we gonna need to update the server?
Eventually, if we add more cameras, we'll need to increase the capacity of the server.
Okay, and do we have an idea if we go up to 16 cameras, what the next server would be, the cost of the next server, if we keep upgrading
Would that be for the LPR system or the park system?
the park system?
I don't have the cost. I do have the cost of the LPR system though. And I think it was between $10,000 and $15,000 per agency. So 30 to 45,000 for that server. And I think that would be running potentially up to 60 LPR cameras in the county. For the parks, I think it would be a lot less. I just don't have that number.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I did an analysis of the server costs and put an annual cost of around $3,000 to $5,000. Yeah, that's spreading out the cost of a server over a lifetime expectancy of the server, so basically 5-year server.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Council President Starr?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Currently, do any of the officers have body cameras?
No. So we just did a demo with Motorola. They did have them for about 2 months, and we had to send them back last week.
That's sad.
Yes.
Just to make sure, there is support and a desire for the body cameras from the officers. This is not I just want to make sure this isn't something that like citizens or council's pushing on. I want to make sure we have buy-in from both sides of the table.
From everybody I've talked to, and that's quite a few, and Lieutenant Hine, who's kind of running the body camera project, there's been no complaints.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right, Councilor Kohler?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the parks camera, I want to just make sure I understand this. The cellular cost, you estimate to be $50 per month per camera?
Correct.
So if we have 16 cameras, that would be $800 a month to run those 16 cameras?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that, the trimmed version of the project to start with at 4 parks would be half that. And then if finances allow, we could add to them later at different parks.
And a crew cleaning up a park all day costs a whole lot more than that. I'm getting the smile from Mr. Lawyer going, uh-huh. All right, thank you very much. Any other questions on these 3 significant public safety camera projects? Ms. Wilson?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So this is a question as a citizen. 4 years ago, I had my car broken into at Keizer Rapids. So they broke my car, police came, thank you. But I knew what happened. I kind of saw the glances, middle of the day, 2 in the afternoon. Obviously, there's no cameras, there's nothing at the park at the time, so there's so much police could do. However, the suspects went to Keizer and used my identity to go to the bank and take money out of it. Now, on my situation at that time, I was caught between a rock and a hard place because that happened in Keizer, but another crime was committed in Salem. So as we are implementing these cameras and working with Marion County and Salem, in a situation like mine, would that be perhaps, would it be potentially more easily solved? Are we going to be working in Salem in a situation like this? Not only have the cameras to share the information, but would it be working closer so perhaps in my situation, whoever did that could have been caught? Thank you.
I think in a situation like that, it would definitely help because usually if, say, your stolen card is taken to a different location, Salem or Woodburn, and used at a bank or a store, the biggest piece of evidence we have is video surveillance from that location. And a lot of times we can't tie that to the person who allegedly who broke into your car, because it could be, the defense would be like, well, a friend of mine gave this car to me and said, go get money out of the bank. So, but having video surveillance from both locations would definitely tie the person to the crime.
And I was kind of thinking in your situation, if we had cameras up at Keizer Rapids and an LPR system, the investigators would start at Keizer Rapids and they would try to identify which vehicle was associated with that particular theft. And once we figure that out, then we start looking at the LPR cameras throughout the city of Keizer and trying to get a license plate. Once we get that license plate, then we run that license plate in the lead system. And we can also do name scans if the driver's not the registered owner. But essentially, it will give us a lead that we can work with very quickly. Oftentimes with car thefts or car break-ins, there's usually a delay. And usually we get a lead when a couple days later, when somebody's trying to pass that person's check or credit card. So there's a significant delay. But I believe with cameras in parks and the LPR system, we will be able to get onto these leads very quickly.
All right, thank you very much. This has been very, very informative. Thank you all. Really appreciate that. Okay, 6:30. So that was three of the big ones on the 23-24. Anything else? Councilor Cross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is actually a two-parter, so I have a question for Mr. Brown or Wood and then Chief Copeland. So with the recruitment and backfill of critical positions of that $428,000, how much do we have left?
I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to calculate that. I mean, we've gone through majority of the recruitments. So we do have some police officers at this point that we're looking to.
So, okay, thank you. But so recruitments, I mean, I know that you're working on Ms. DePina and city recorder and city attorney. And then the last, Chief, the next question will be for Chief, but we have 2 frozen positions right now for the police. We started with 3 in August.
I'll answer that, Madam Mayor. Yeah, yes, and we will have some left over from the overlap money, so.
But now only 1's unfrozen, but 2 are still frozen?
No, 2 are, I was speaking of the funds that were set aside for the overlap in employees. We will have, I think, a pretty good chunk under, I want to say around 100,000, but don't quote me on it.
Did we use any of this recruitment money for police officers?
Not from that pot of money.
So not from the 428,000?
No,
Got it.
just the, yeah.
And well, just one more follow-up. And what is high performance organization training for 20,000? What was that, or did we spend it?
That was the leadership training. We put nearly all the employees through a 3-day retreat. And then the remaining amount from this year was to send some, our department heads to the on-site in training. So only one of them is gone. We are hoping to have a couple more go by the end of the year.
Are we still at like 102 employees?
I'm sorry?
How many employees? 100?
102 FTEs approved, yeah.
Are there any open positions?
There's
are
always
not
open
filled?
positions.
No, they're all filled.
I'm not sure what you're getting at,
I'm saying like, are we
Councilor
hiring for anything with those 102 positions or are they all filled?
Cross. No, there's 2 vacant ones for the police, I think that's what I said earlier. And of course, there's always one, like our GIS technician is gone and we'll have to recruit for that. But yeah, it's rare that we have a full house hired.
Thank you. Okay, Chief.
Actually, Mr. Pina, Mr. Brown, sorry, Mr. Pina, did you have something to add there regarding the recruitment since you conducted the great majority of them?
We also have an accounting tech recruitment that will be opening soon as that person has just left and moved to another state.
Okay, thank you. Chief?
Chief, how many police officers do you have right now?
Today we have 40. On Saturday, we'll have 39.
And then how
Sergeant
many?
Bamford's retiring
Isn't there a
March 1st.
couple that are due to retire this year?
Jay Prall's retiring in July, and James Young is retiring December, well, projected, December 31st.
And thank you for your service. Thank you. So what did our staffing levels, have they always hovered around that 40 or 42?
Yep. Well, back in 2017, we were at 37, thanks to the council. We're now at 42. We've been really close to 42 for, since 2017, minus a body or two. And actually, we just hired Jesse White. We'll swear him in on Monday here before you guys. You'll get to meet him. But he actually was, technically, back before Sergeant Bamford turned in his retirement paperwork, he was supposed to fill Jay Prall's spot in July. So it was kind of this overlap, knowing that he was going to the academy in April, and to get him hired on and kind of useful to the citizens is going to be September, October, by the time he gets trained.
And will you remind me, how long is the training process? Is that like a year?
We have to hire them before they can get an academy date. Once we hire them, the academy's typically out about 60 days. And this one's pretty consistent with that. And then it's 16 weeks of the academy, and then about a 4-month field training and evaluation program once they get back.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Anything else on the 23-24?
Okay,
next page.
moving on, 24-25. At this point, given all the projects that I've talked about before, we still have about 1.9 million in ARPA funds remaining. Those are unallocated, so we're going to have to do something with this next budget cycle. Some potential projects that we're considering internally are looking at some strategic property acquisitions. There's some properties that would be of benefit to the city that may be coming on the market. Looking at resolving our per subject salary reporting issue to the extent that we can use ARPA funds for that. Do a website update, look at implementing a sidewalk installation repair program, doing some pre-design work in anticipation of future funding opportunities. Some of the funding opportunities that come out are kind of a rush. If you have plans ready, we can get you some money, and that would be the case for some of these. That if we can have shelf-ready designs, we can say, hey, we're ready to go, give us your money. Also looking at doing some site prep work in anticipation of economic development. The city does have some properties that if we did some work at them, we could get them on the market at a better outlook as far as either selling, leasing, or getting them into play. Like we've talked about, recruitment and backfill some critical positions. As indicated, the PERS retire rehire program that we currently have in place is going to expire December 31st. So we'll see a handful of people all leaving at the same time. So this would give us an opportunity to backfill before that is an issue. Some of the projects that we're looking at doing some of the design engineering work, pre-work, would be the Verda Lane sidewalk between Dearborn and Chemawa. Doing that engineering type of stuff. And also putting together a master plan for the Keizer Little Lake, specifically with stormwater issues. So those are some of the projects that we'll have to consider, do some deliberations during the budget process. If there's other things that come to mind, feel free to send me an email, and we can do some scouting out some of the early work so we can talk about it during the budget process.
So a lot of these that were listed here are ones, some of them are from our short-term goals from City Council. Some of them are a result of projects that we have identified over the last couple of years, especially the one piece of sidewalk that we need to put in the Dearborn-Chemawa section of Verda. And then some of the other things we've talked about in terms of some of the city-owned properties, getting them market ready so they can start producing for the people of Keizer. So things like that. So I anticipate that some description of these will be included in the budget packet.
Absolutely.
All right. Ms. Martin?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to see at least 500,000 additional dollars allocated or reserved for the police evidence building, because 300,000 just doesn't seem like near enough when we look at the events storage unit, so.
Just a follow-up on that then, by the time we get to budget, will we have a closer number on that, the police evidence storage project?
I would anticipate yes.
Okay, thank you. So that will be added to the section for 24-25. Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And we'll have better figures for both, because I know Ms. Martin asked the question, but I'm not sure there was ever a solid answer to her question about the difference and why the significant difference between 800,000 for the storage unit and the 300,000 for the police. So I'm assuming we'll have better figures for both.
Correct.
And that allows the decision of which to move forward with if we have to look at an either or. Does that allow us the ability to make that decision?
That'll be a little bit challenging as we've got the event center already out to bid. So we'll have to solidify some of the design work for the evidence building.
So follow up on that, would that 1.9, some of that could be, we'll have the more solid number on the police evidence building, so that will change that approximate unallocated funds into an allocation for a closer number on the police evidence building, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so that will change that number. Okay, thank you. Councilor Cross?
This is another twofold, Mr. Wood, than the chief. Website update, like, I thought we just updated our website, and how much money are you looking to put into it?
That's a good question. We did do a update to the back end of the website. It was actually at the recommendation of our web developer company. We outsourced that to a third-party company, and they wanted to get rid of the back office. I'm not sure exactly the database that manages all that. So they upgraded that for us. And they also did a refresher on the front page. However, there's some additional work that still needs to be done, and currently we have a committee reviewing whether we want to stay with the existing provider or look elsewhere. The price is going to really vary quite a bit. Our existing vendor has said about $10,000 to do a refresher of the entire website for us. If we go somewhere else, if we decide that it's more, we want to go somewhere different, it could be $30,000 to $40,000.
So this will be, Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I would, I've done a couple of these and I don't think it will hit that price range. And so comparatively speaking, this is a really small one of maybe the smallest one on this list. I think we're talking 20,000 or less.
Okay, thank you. And then this question is for Chief, as we're talking about public safety, and we're hearing from Detective and Lieutenant and how important it is and how we're understaffed. We were just at a breakfast the other day, and I think we figured out it was like $450 a police officer, so it would be that $10,000 for, what were those?
Oh, the rifle-rated plates for the officers to put on their vests.
That Salem Police has?
Yeah.
And we don't. So again, I'm gonna use your example, chairs, website, or police, and keeping them safe. I'm gonna go with the police.
Okay. Is this a project proposal, Chief, that has been discussed?
No, through the Salem Police Foundation, their auction, or their ask last year was these rifle-rated plates. And I didn't hear back if they were able to purchase all of them until this year, which was late last week, that they were able to purchase all their officers' rifle-rated plates that they put into their outer carrier vests. So that's when the conversation came up and the price for all of them. But it's not a side project that we've been talking about yet.
All right, thank you. All right, Ms. Herb.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Wood, I remember when we first were getting the ARPA funds and you had presented a slideshow and there were quite stringent requirements on how this money is spent. And so I mean, this seems all over the board and I don't remember some of it would meet some of those criteria. So has that loosened up or something, or what's going on?
It has absolutely loosened up. The way that the federal government worked it is they said basically if you get $10 million or less, you can use it for anything government related. There's a few restrictions. You can't pay down your PERS obligations, so we couldn't just give it all to the retirement folks and say, here you go. We couldn't use it for settlement of litigation, and I don't think we can use it to pay down debt. I think those are the three main areas that. Correct. Well, we'll have to investigate how we might be able to use that for that. So, like Amy indicated, to the extent possible, if we could use it for that, that might be something to consider.
Great question. Yes, things changed quite a bit as the federal government kind of worked through this process. And we kept getting new definitions for the ARPA requirements. So thank you for that. Anything else on some of these? And then as suggested by Mr. Brown, Mr. Wood, if you see something on here or there was something on one of our goals and you're wondering, could this be used, to add something, keeping in mind that is going to be something else comes off, very likely. This is this list will probably not all be funded, but these are things that could be funded, and then we will, through the budget process, do the prioritization when we have more comprehensive information on these items, okay? Anything else on the 24-25? Okay.
Okay, we got a few loose ends, kind of things that we thought we could talk about that may impact the budgeting process. We've kind of talked about the PERS work after retirement policy. Our existing policy is ending at the end of December 31st, 2024. However, the state has said, hey, we want to extend that for another 10 years. We're still kind of working through the process to see if that's a policy that we want to adopt for the city or not. So basically the idea was before this policy came into place, people could retire and come back to work for up to 600 hours or 1,039 hours, depending on what PERS tier classification they were. That this policy by the state said, we don't care anymore, you can come back, work full-time for a certain period of time. The benefit is the employee basically locks in their retirement and they're getting their retirement payments along with working full-time. The benefit to the city is we're not required to pay the employee contribution that's paid by the employer, so I don't know why I call it the employee contribution. But that's a 6% that we would be saving up front. In addition, the pension piece, the employer contribution, that goes directly to start paying down our pension obligation. So with our current policy, we had 7 out of 18 eligible employees elect to do that. We saved almost $100,000 by not paying the employee pickup, the 6%. The city has paid $418,000 towards our overall pension obligation. Basically there was some requests by city council of what does that equate to. That results in $771,000 in savings over the next 20 years. So that's going to be not an insignificant amount that we're going to be saving, and that will reduce the contribution rates that we ultimately have to pay. Following this, there was some additional discussion on, okay, so with this program, we're typically hiring top step people to come back. More expensive to keep them on versus hiring someone right off the street. So the analysis to the lower left kind of works through what does that look like. So the first column with the step 7, that would be an experienced officer that retires and comes back. The step 1 would be the brand new officer. So as you get down to the total base compensation, the all-in for the step 7 is $123,602. If you look at a step 1 person, it's $94,010. However, when you pull out the employer contribution that goes towards the PERS obligation, the net employee cost is $95,470. So you compare that to the $94,10, it's kind of a wash, except for you have to pay down your PERS obligation. So that's kind of the math of how that works. So there's immediate benefit if you say, oh, let's not embrace this policy, let's let people retire and go off and we'll hire new people. There is some immediate cost savings. However, long-term, there's also the benefit of paying down the PERS obligation if we do the retire, rehire process. So when people ask me what's the best way to go, I say yes. Unfortunately, there's a good answer for both ways. So that's, as we move along, we're going to be bringing back some more policy information regarding this to the City Council and have some additional deliberations. But this will at least get your pumps primed to figure out how we want to go with that. So,
Okay.
Any questions on?
Anything on
that?
PERS? I'm looking at Ms. Martin.
I just want to say congratulations on doing that. I think that one thing needs to be said about rehiring people who have retired. You save a great deal of money just on training and the efficiencies of somebody who knows their job versus somebody who's inexperienced coming in brand new. So I like the idea personally.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. There's a lot of, I can't even talk, a lot of qualitative reasons outside of just the purely financial to consider.
Thank you. Anything else on the PERS pages? One of our largest underfunded mandates.
The final topic that I have is the opioid settlement funds. The city is party to multiple national opioid settlements. I think I'm up to about 9 different agreements that we're party to. During fiscal year 22-23, the city got $72,000 roughly. This year, I'm kind of year to date, we've gotten about $15,000. However, I anticipate another 35 probably coming our way. On an ongoing basis, I think we'll be in the range of $50,000 per year. But don't quote me on this because the payments have been somewhat sporadic when I start looking at timelines for when we receive them. The agreements are all slightly different. However, I believe we get an annual payment over the course of 20 years with some of these. So this is going to be kind of a fairly long-term funding mechanism for us. There are some requirements of how the funds are to be spent. At your space, I provided an FAQ that was recommended to be handed out in addition to an appendix that's referenced in the FAQ that has a lot of the details of how we can spend these dollars. I'm going to be attending a training March 21st. Apparently throughout the state, there's been some issues of people not sure how to spend these. So the state has said, hey, we'll get everyone together and do a course on how we can spend these. So we'll have some more information at the end of March. The current recommendation the staff is going to be bringing is probably to support the police department staffing and community outreach processes. So that's really the area most affected by the opioid epidemic with city staffing. So I think that's all I have.
Thank you. Anything, questions on the opioid settlement funds? Ms. Christopher?
Say what you just said. Your recommendation is going to be what?
It's going to be to use it to support police department staffing and community outreach.
So what's the plan?
You have to give me the money first. No.
Well played.
Show me the money.
So in just initial conversations with a gal named Diana Dickey, she works at Marion County as a substance abuse prevention coordinator. When I mentioned the possibility of this position, and it would be a part-time position, I should say it would be a full-time officer assigned as a part-time collateral duty to kind of, if it's $50,000, it's maybe a third of the wages overall. So it'd be a third of his time, her time, to go out and educate the citizens of Keizer. And I think for me personally, like my passion would be to start in the middle schools and then work in the high schools, and let's educate our youth to keep them healthy. And then we can get into different forums. We go neighbor watch, we can do brochures, we can do all sorts of stuff in the community. But I've seen too many kids use this stuff and overdose and almost die. Narcan saves a lot of people right now. I've seen some that have died that are, college athletes that just get hurt. They start using Vicodin, and then the Vicodin runs out and they're addicted. Then they turn to opiates, and fentanyl obviously is a killer right now. So I think, oh, go ahead.
So would this take all of that opioid money to fund?
I think kind of the idea would be, yes, we would fund that into a police officer position with the expectation that they're teaming up with substance abuse coordinators and other people to educate the people within our community. Yeah.
Okay, we get the money for how long?
20 years.
Okay. I think this is a winner.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Counselor Cross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This question is for the chief. So, or Mr. Wood, or Mr. Brown. So is this additional opioid, like, position, would it be additional to the two that we're already lagging? Are we trying to fill that one position?
I think at the last meeting, I told you we were going to try to fund all of the positions. This would be one of the pieces to help fund all the open positions.
So this wouldn't be additional? This is kind of like a Band-Aid?
This is to help get them back up to full staff.
Thank you.
And would it also then provide some additional services that we need on the public safety side? Chief, you were mentioning that, especially with our youth and young adults, this is a scourge that we are seeing in our middle school and high school in our community. So this would actually, this is workload that we are already experiencing in our police work. Is that correct?
It would be, we don't do a great job right now in the education piece. And that's where we just don't have the time and the resources to devote to complete education. Yes, this would kind of be a dream for us to be able to work with Diana. She's super excited about it, and a team to really just educate.
So a great part of the prevention piece and the community outreach, and also building relationships between our law enforcement personnel and our youth.
Yep, yes,
Winner all the way across the board.
I believe so.
All right, thank you. Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess my concern is when you look at how much time it's probably going to take somebody to do the outreach necessary, I'm wondering why this wouldn't be an additional position in addition to the two positions that were down already. I guess that's just my thought. Because it just seems with the opioid issue being such a big issue in this community and it affecting our youth, it seems like this would be a position that would be very valuable to the city and reduce crime and deaths and on and on.
Chief?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would agree with you. Obviously, that if we could create an education piece and an officer that could respond at a moment's notice to a crisis within the city and to work with the school, the two middle schools, and it could be a full-time position. I think you're right. But currently we're trying to get some officers back. So that's going to be your guys' decision.
Thank you.
Mr. Thompson?
Just to piggyback, Chief, on Ms. Martin's point, if there was enough money to hire back the two officers were down, could this position does this position have to be an officer, or could it be a sworn position, or could it be somebody in the police department who's unsworn?
You know, I'll give you my experience, and it may be contradictory to what you hear out in the media. Kids love cops. I've done a blast camp for last year was our first year, and I did it 6 years before COVID. And I have established relationships with kids in this community that will last forever. We go to the high school. I coached at McNary High School for 5 years. Everybody knew I was a cop. There wasn't one kid who didn't play football because I was a police officer. You get the right person in the job. And I think that when someone says it's a police officer, it carries just a little bit more weight for expertise, for a little bit of, and I mean, you don't see it on the news, and I'll tell you that, but when we walk into the room lights up in almost every situation. Now, there's certain groups that don't like cops, and I get that. But I think it would serve the community better as a police officer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Christopher?
So this brings me to ask, I had wondered if now's the time to see if there's enough support on the long-range planning task force. We have an opportunity, because it's an election year, to take a ballot measure before the people at no cost to the city. Is now the time we ask for more support for police? And is now the time that we would ask staff to prepare something for the budget committee to look at that would ask folks if they'd be willing to pay up to $10 a month for police services?
So that would be something that would come to the budget committee, along with, this is a task force, so
Right.
as you know, we're limited on what we can do here.
Right.
If there are people who are interested in adding positions, we have a number of ways we can do that. And, but we have to look at the chief and our, Mr. Brown, Mr. Wood, for
I'd like
what
to
is the
know.
model
Yeah,
for law enforcement? Are we able to fulfill the necessary staffing for our public safety? Is there a recommendation for a certain number of positions? Because right now, our police fee is based on a staff recommendation of 5 on a current service model. So I think part of what we could look at is there another recommendation looking at the 24-25 budget cycle to make a change to that level of service? And that would be the recommendation that could come in to the budget committee for consideration? Or is that too fast to be able to do that kind of analysis? Because, I mean, yes, Chief Copeland, you've been with the department a long time, but doing a comprehensive look at level of service might take a little bit longer. But this is not something that would be necessarily tied to the budget process, because that is something that could be adopted at another date.
but Mayor, what I'm asking is, if we, that's gonna take a while, absolutely. And we'll wanna have that information. But in the meantime, and I would just ask you, you're the professional in the room, we're just volunteers. Would that be helpful if we had just an advisory vote that asked Keizer residents if they were willing to support up to $10 per month? Would that be helpful? And what I'm thinking of is that gives a sense of security for the police department, knowing they have that support up to $10. It's not adding $1 a year, it's up to $10. And it also gives the taxpayers in Keizer the opportunity to vote on spending with a cap. And then when we eventually meet that cap, they would have the opportunity to determine whether or not we want to extend that cap. Is that a helpful thing as an advisory vote?
So that's a political question, but from an administrative person, I'll answer that,
Yeah,
if we knew how far we could go, then that would make things easier.
Sure. I would ask Chief.
Well, I would agree with what Mr. Brown just said. If we knew the funds were there, we can budget around it
Yeah.
and we can sustain long-term. You know, we don't have to go year to year coming back to you asking for more and more money.
So Mayor, is that something we can ask staff to put together to bring to the budget committee? So what that would look like?
So if you're talking about a dollar amount or level of service, because that's two different questions.
I'm just asking about a dollar amount.
So you ask me a flat dollar amount, and then asking
they could
staff
build
to,
around it.
to define the level of service that would purchase.
Correct.
And then we could have that conversation about, is that sufficient level of service? What does that look like in terms of going out in the future? Again, what we're seeing right now with our police fee is that based on the level of service, it goes up to make sure that the 5 positions funded by that fee are fully covered. So, you know, looking at it from an operational standpoint, I want to look at our staff to make sure that what the expectation we're giving to the community about what that will buy is something that we can then let them know that this is the level of service that they will purchase. Is it enough? Is it sufficient? But more importantly, is it simply bodies, or are we actually looking at a change in how services are delivered? And I think that's a very important question to go to the budget committee, city council, and if it is the choice of the city council to go to the voters, they could, knowing that under the charter, that is not a requirement.
So I don't even know if there's desire of this long-range planning task force to ask the question.
I think it's behooves us to ask our city staff to look at the level of service and bring back a range of recommendations that could be discussed. Mr. Brown, and then Mr. Wood.
Yeah, I think Chief Copeland's been in the seat for, I don't know, we probably have a 6-month evaluation to do tomorrow or something like that. But, anyway, but I need Chief Copeland to make an assessment of what do I need to run my department optimally. And then that would inform the decision on what we would try to request. We know what Chief Teague wanted, which is where that 5 officers came from. That fee was never tied to it, but he was asked, what do you need to have a well-run police station? He said, I need 5 officers, and that's where the genesis of that number came from.
So if I understand you.
Stand by.
I need Chief Copeland, he's been in the seat for about a half year to evaluate. He's made some shifts with his staff, and I wouldn't assume that he wants to do it exactly the same as the previous chief.
So with that, following up on that notion, I think that level of service is really important to understand what we're asking the people of Keizer to purchase in terms of level of service. And I would want to leave it to Chief Copeland and his current leadership team to come back with that staffing recommendation with a range of options for the budget committee to consider. And then that would go to a recommendation then to council for the 24-25 budget. With the recommendation, because that would feed into, because each year the police fee has to be approved. So that level of service could then be included in that fee if the budget committee and the city council so recommends.
All of that is true, and that's not at all what I was asking.
I know it isn't.
I want to, as part of the recommendations coming from staff, I'd like to know what it looks like, and if we go out and ask the question, and just ask people if they're willing to support police to that level. That's what I would like to have. And I'd like to know if anybody else on this long-range task force is even interested in doing that. But we have an opportunity, because it's an election year, we have an opportunity to be able to ask people at no cost to the city, other than some staff time, to prepare that. I would like that to be part of the information that comes back to the budget committee as a consideration.
I understand what you were saying, and yes, I understand that this would be a discussion about by the city council, whether or not it goes out to a vote to change the level of the police fee for a change in level of service.
No, I don't want to change the police fee. I don't want to touch the police fee.
So this would be an additional $10.
No, this would be an advisory vote that says, would you support paying up to $10 per month for police services? If it failed, then the fees for service are already in place. They would continue to be added $1 a year indefinitely. But if the folks said yes, that we could spend up to $10 a month, that could create, certainly the chief would know, now we could increase that rather than what currently is $1 a year, typically. It goes up $1 a year. They could take it up higher based on the analysis of what he really needs, if they were willing to support it. That's what I'm saying. If they say, no, I would not support police at up to $10, then there's not a lot of analysis that would have to be done, because you're going to be with the current fees for service that are in place, and they'll continue to go up about $1 a year.
So I think that we're talking about level of service for the police, and I understand that. I think that we're getting the cart a little bit before the horse, because I think we need to give the police and our staff an opportunity to talk about level of service. How many positions do we need? What is that kind of cost? Is $10, $20, whatever that level is for the funding, would be a recommendation that would come back so that the budget committee could discuss that. And then again, it would be up to the city council if it goes to adoption of the change for the recommended level of the police fee, or if it's going to go out for an advisory vote, because that's not a requirement under the charter, as you know. Okay, thank you. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure who this question is for, but it seems to be the hot topic, police and public safety. So we have the 5 positions that you just said the service fee is for, correct? The police fee.
Permission to respond? Yeah.
Mr. Brown.
Yeah, like I said, it's not tied, it's not tied by resolution or ordinance to those 5 positions, but historically, they've gotten that from the recommendation the previous chief said, I need 5 more officers to
I guess
run
I'm just
this.
trying to, I'm really just trying to figure out if we pass the budget, so then in August, we froze the 3 positions, and then you just unfroze 1 position. So now we're down 2. How are we communicating with the city or the residents when they're paying a fee and maybe they don't have the time to get into this city stuff? Because I'm walking around thinking I have a fully staffed police.
Yeah, I mean,
We've never had that.
we don't know if that's a fully staffed police is what Chief Copeland needs. Does he need the same organization that Chief Teague needs? Like I said, he needs to perform that analysis.
I don't, thank you. Chief, do you need more police officers?
We've done a pretty good job in the city. As you guys drive up and down the streets and don't see homeless camps and you don't see a lot of people that you would see in Salem, Portland, and other cities our size, maybe besides Lake Oswego.
What positions are not filled?
We don't have a crew position filled. Community response unit is responsible for the drugs and homelessness and overall problems. So what we used them for was when I was the patrol lieutenant, they were my problem solvers. When we dealt with one person 5 times in a month, I said, crew, you go solve that problem. Like whatever they need. And it's not always taking someone to jail. Sometimes it's getting somebody into mental health. Maybe it's getting family members involved in their lives. It's surrounding them with services. That takes time. We had 4 people back in crew with an option to get a 5th, which we never actually filled through attrition and different things that happened. But right now we have 3 back there. And so we're looking to fill a 4th. And I think that would be enough that we need back there. And so I'm not asking for a 5th crew person. I need someone who can actually, what I need now is we lost our crime analyst to the DOJ, and she's doing great, by the way. So she's there now as of February 12th. But what she did was she identified these people and the crimes, and she did social media, so she communicated with the public, and she was doing a phenomenal job. I need her back at some point, him, whoever wants to fill that spot, non-sworn position. And I do need another crew guy. So those would be the 2 that if I could get back right now, that would help you guys when you're driving around Keizer and saying, I'm proud of the city that I live in, because all the 911 calls are being handled within, immediately. All the investigations, you talked about these guys doing investigations and following up on our felony cases. What you want is the criminals to say what they're currently saying. I shouldn't have come to Keizer. I was told not to come to Keizer, and I should not have come to Keizer. We hear that time and time again. They steal stuff at Target. And then like, oh, we heard there's a bunch of cops around here. And sure enough, we arrest them. We follow up on our investigations. That's the level of service you want. When a dog is barking next door, guess what? Nobody else in this county is coming except for Keizer. We will come talk to that person for you. When you get into a car crash in the street, nobody else in this county is going to come help you exchange if you're not hurt. We do. So you're talking about level of service and what you expect from a small town. I mean, we're a small town, 40,000, 15th largest in the state. But we can still provide that. I think you give me my 42 back, let's do this community outreach person as a 43rd, and we can change the way the city looks when it responds to opioids and different things. Yeah. I think we're in a good spot.
Thank you for your service. I think that you kind of answered Mr. Wood's question if you really need it, because heck yeah, you do. Thank you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate something you mentioned earlier, that back in 2016, there were 37. And then when we initiated the police fee for the 5 additional positions, that's when we got to the 40, 42 level. So there were identified 40, 42 positions, but they were not filled, and they were essentially frozen for quite some time. And that's when we got the recommendation on, if we do these 5, we can make a change in the level of service. That's what changed at that point.
That's correct.
Thank you. All right, I think we're going to have some great conversation, and I really appreciate the work by Mr. Brown, Mr. Wood, Mr. Pina, and Chief Copeland on really looking at level of service for the community. Appreciate that. Councilor Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I can, we kind of didn't quite finish the opioid settlement funds. One of my questions was, we've got almost $87,000 that are listed here as 22, 23, 23, 24. Are those funds spent, or are they just kind of earmarked at this point?
Mr. Wood?
I would say they're not spent and they're not earmarked yet. So this is going to be subject to deliberation when the time comes to figure out what we're going to do with them.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anything else? Mr. Wood?
We have one more presentation. Mr. Brown's going to be doing that. So it might make sense to have a 5-minute changeover so we can do a costume change maybe.
Okay, all right. And we have been sitting here for a while, so let's take a 5-minute stretch break, and we'll be reconvening. We are in recess. All right, the Long Range Planning Task Force is back in session, and we are going to continue with our presentation on the PERS obligation. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. As I said in the last meeting, one of the intents for us tonight was to pull everything together that is in question, or that, and some of it we had to put out there that is a little bit vague because there's, we can't show all our cards right now for some of the different things in the ARPA funding. But I think by budget time, we will be able to show all our cards as far as some things that we just can't put out there in the public yet. But this is one that thought was a good time to go over. I went with, this is something I've talked with most of the city councilors, I think all of them about actually. And it's our outlook on what we do with these city-owned properties. So the current strategy for city-owned properties was to lease it so that we'd have an income stream that would diversify our revenues. And so what you're looking at is a ground lease and expecting a developer to come along and want to build something that they would own on top of the ground, and we would collect a ground lease for that, giving us some long-term revenues. The challenge is that the cities aren't very good developers, and we're not really very good landlords either. So what we just wanted to go over with you today is maybe a little bit different way of looking at that. In a budget, there's two different ways to approach things. One is to try to increase revenues so you can afford what you can afford now. And the other way is to try to decrease expenses. And I understand what the tactic for, let's get some revenues that are gonna keep coming each year and be able to help fund some of the needs that we have. But if you could perpetually reduce the expenses, then you would be achieving the same result of balancing the bottom line. So our total general fund budget is $16.486 million this year. And I'll explain some of these terms in a little bit later, but the PERS normal cost is $329,000. The unfunded accrued liability is $1.5 million. So we're spending about $1.8 million out of the general fund to pay for pension cost. And that's, the rest of your budget is $14.67 million. So we hired employees under a social contract and a legal obligation to fulfill to them the promises that were made when they were hired. For the police department, they have always been PERS employees. That's what was required by state statute. So when the police department was begun in the mid-'80s, early to mid-'80s, their employees were tier 1 and tier 2. And then in 2003, we came along and the benefits or the plans changed a little bit, and the OPSORP program came along. It was an alternative to tier 1 and tier 2. It was much less generous than the tier 1, tier 2 program. But the risk also was shared by the employer and the employee versus tier 1 and tier 2, a defined benefit plan. If the state invests poorly and gets a bad return, the government or the city government is responsible for making up that difference. So the burden is on the employer. What we have now through the OPSORP program, the OPSRP, is a shared hybrid system. So the state is part of it's defined benefit and part of it is a defined contribution. So it's a shared benefit. The state has not fully left a defined benefit program yet. So how do we get there? Well, actuarial assumptions have changed over the last 20, 30, 40 years. People are living longer, investing returns, the economic factors, the Great Recession of 2008, public investments not doing as well, and PERS investments particularly continuing to underperform. So here's a snapshot of the PERS rates. Actually, only the last one is advisory. The rest are the actual rates that we paid. They're calculated on a biennium basis. So every 2 years, the study's done, and they say, City of Keizer, you're gonna pay these rates for the next 2 years. And there's an interim study done in year one that's called the advisory rate. And it gives you a snapshot of what your obligation might look like for the next biennium. So another 16%, this is the advisory rate. All of them pretty much go up 5 percentage points. And that's roughly, depending on differing a little bit from column to column, a 16% increase, which would translate into another $270,000 from the general fund, which is also about the cost of 2 police officers. So let me define a couple of those things. The normal cost is the value of the benefit for 1 additional year. That is what the city would pay regardless of if our unfunded accrued liability was paid off, we would still pay this UAL, the unfunded or the normal cost. The other part that's variable is the unfunded accrued liability, as we call the UAL. That's the difference between your assets, what you have in the investment pool, and what is needed to make your 20-year obligations. And then this one always kind of cracked me up. The annual required contribution, sometimes called the ARC, is not actually required, but it is called the annual required contribution. But that is the UAL amortized over 20 years plus the normal cost. So it's basically, you're saying here's 1 more year of service, and then we refinanced your debt every 2 years. And so it's like an asymptote in math, where you're always approaching but never getting to that line. But those are just some definitions there. So let's look at the numbers. Our unfunded accrued liability for Tier 1, Tier 2, as of December 31st, 2022 was $22.7 million. And for the OPSORP, it's $1.9 million, almost $2 million. Most of our UAL comes from Tier 1, Tier 2 positions. So the net, you add those two together to get the net unfunded accrued liability. And what I've circled there, the 0%, that is something the state created probably 4, maybe 5 years ago, called a side account. And cities could put money aside that would offset that. It would basically start to fund that unfunded accrued liability. And they actually matched it 25% the first couple years, and it went really quick. But they have talked about putting other match money out there for it. I can't tell you for sure what the status of that, if that's funded right now. But regardless, the option is there to put more money aside. So this is what our PERS liability looks like. $42 million is the net present cost that will require to fund pensions from retired and current employees over the next 20 years. You can break that down into the amount that's funded and the amount that's unfunded. So 19.363 million is the amount that's funded. 22.652 is the amount that is unfunded. And that's the amount that's re-amortized or refinanced every 2 years for another 20-year period. So imagine if you were fully funded and didn't have this UAL out there, you would have another $1.5 million to pay for services. And you would still have that normal cost of $330,000, but you'd have a lot more money to buy services. So what do we know? We know that over the long run, the stock market has only lost value in, I think, 1 to 2 to 3 years. So let's look at PERS investments and compared to, this is the OPERS, it stands for the Oregon Public Employee Reserve Fund, and the green bars are the OPER account, and the orange bar there is the earnings for that each year. Honestly, in this 10-year period, it doesn't look that bad. The return was 8.76% on average, but if we put that up against the Dow, you see it's tighter, it's more compact, because pension investment is typically aimed at preserving principal. Not as aggressive as our Wall Street traders. It's losing principal is not an acceptable outcome for pensions. So they typically have a more conservative investment policy, but you can see it does underperform when it comes to the Dow. So each of the actuarial studies done every 2 years are grouped on independent and the SLGRP, which is the state and local government rate pool. In 2004, cities and other public employers had the ability to join a larger pool, this SLGRP, or they could remain independent. Keizer chose to be independent, which I think was a good decision, because being an independent, you can pay down your obligation, whereas the pooled employers cannot. So we actually can create these side accounts for our unfunded accrued liability. The value right now for paying that 20-year liability is really good right now, because a dollar today is worth, I think it's later in the presentation, but $1.80, $1.70 down the road, the net present value. So because the obligation is 20 years out. So, but if you put a dollar away today, compounding interest, it's worth much more. So one of the questions you might get, like, well, what if the state loses, investment loses money? And here's kind of the math on that. If you start with $100,000 on the left side, in the blue, on the right side, you start with $75,000. Both of them lose 3%. Stock market rebounds 3%, and you don't get back to your 100,000 because it's 3% of 97 instead of 3% of 100. But the difference there is you've gained back $2,900 versus $2,900 versus $2,200. Plus, you're still that $25,000 behind. So you lose more when it goes down, but you gain more when it rebounds. So this is a real example from another Oregon city who paid down, put money towards the side account, and frustratingly watched the rates go up, but finally saw relief in the last biennium to the tune of $300,000. But even as they were going along, as the rates, they would have been double what the increase would have been doubled. And so they were saving $300,000 by having a less of an increase. But that site account. And there's a lot of communities across the state who have done this and are seeing the rates go down. So back to these city-owned properties, that one way of getting revenue from ground leases, I would suggest an alternative strategy is to get these properties in the hands of developers and use the proceeds to pay down the unfunded accrued liability. And that would give you a much greater return than getting ground leases. Worked with a lot of airports, and we have some people on our council that are familiar with airports, but airports do ground leases, and you'll get like $100 a year for a hangar. But the person's renting the hangar for $500 a month. I mean, that's where the money is. It's in the real improvements, not in the ground. And so this is just one of the other strategies we wanted to present tonight with the impact of paying down the UAL. What could that be? Here's the number I was looking for earlier. $1 put away today is worth $1.84 down the road. A reduction in that unfunded accrued liability. So if we had a $4 million property, the proceeds could cut the unfunded accrued liability by $7.36 million. And per year, that turns into $286,000 in spending power. And you get another $40,000 from property taxes, because as long as it's in the city's hands, we're not being taxed on it. So total benefit, $326,000 in additional resources. That's per year and perpetual. So it's not just a one-time shot, it's a permanent reduction in your costs. So we know there's basic services we needed. We've touched on probably darn near everyone tonight, and everybody, something that's agreed by everybody is everybody cares about the city and wants it to be the best they can. But like I said, cities are not typically good developers or landlords, and I think putting these properties back in the developers' hands brings us taxable. It also gives us an opportunity to put that money towards an unfunded accrued liability and give us more sustainable purchasing power for the future. What I'd warn you is about the actuarial reports are done every 2 years. So depending on the timing and when we're able to dispose of property, and we have to have a willing buyer, we can't just say we're gonna sell it, and there has to be a willing buyer. But when that money gets spent and put in, or the property gets purchased, we receive the money, we put it into a side account, how it affects your UAL for that biennium is all about the timing. So if you're in the back half of that biennium, it's probably not gonna affect your next biennium rates. It would, but 2 years later, it would absolutely affect your rates. So that's, unfortunately, I did a lot of pictures, not a lot of words, so I was pretty efficient with my 23 slides on time. But with that, just wanted to share that strategy with you. Like I said, I've talked with most of the city council about it, and glad to share that with, ask any questions or answer any questions. I'm tongue-tied.
Ms. Christopher, you're asking about the location of the properties?
I'm asking, is that all the properties that we own?
Though, that is the,
Is that the only city-owned property, is what I'm asking?
yeah, I think those are the ones that are really the most feasible for us to do something with.
Okay,
Yeah, we may own small pieces of.
the little orphan property.
Exactly, yeah, well said.
Okay.
Any further questions on these city-owned properties and using them for the unfunded actuarial liability, UAL?
Accrued liability.
Accrued liability, thank you. Okay. Very good. So no further questions on that. Thank you very much. This is very helpful to know what staff's been looking at for the opportunities for turning these lands into something that will benefit the people of Keizer. And once they're developed, it benefits our economic outlook as well for jobs and businesses here in Keizer. Because all of those, these properties here, these are Keizer stations, so they are zoned what? Approximately.
So there's. a
I'm looking at
mix.
Mr. Witham.
No pun intended, but.
Sure.
Shane knows.
So the left-hand picture, the bottom property is zoned mixed use. Above Lock Haven, those properties are zoned, I think that's commercial mixed or commercial general, not commercial retail. And then over here on the right-hand picture that's Volcano Stadium in the corner. So the strip that runs north and south is industrial general, and the area right behind, like if you drew basically the line with the Volcanoes property, that piece is industrial business park, the other piece is industrial general.
Okay, thank you.
I'm pretty sure that's right.
There'll be a quiz later. All right, thank you very much. And then, has the city been working then for getting these ready to market? And I think that was one of the things that was mentioned in the ARPA funds, was to prepare these lands to make them more marketable.
Yes. Yes, Madam Mayor, that is what was referred to as some of these projects that you're looking at.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on the disposition of these assets for the city? All right, no further questions. Fantastic. Anything else for the good of the order? The time is 8:57. Thank you all. We are adjourned.